Hey, in this tutorial, I will show you why you should consider using streaming export in GA4 to have real-time data in BigQuery, how much it will cost you, and how to access this data using SQL. First of all, if you already have BigQuery connected to GA4, you probably have seen that under Admin Settings, BigQuery Links, you have an option to enable streaming export. Until you enable this setting, BigQuery will not have real-time data from your Google Analytics property. And once you enable this setting, it will add additional cost to your Google Cloud invoice. So before you do that, it's good to know if it will be useful at all. By the way, if this is the first time that you see settings that I'm sharing right now, please check video description for a guide on how to create Google BigQuery project and how to link it to your GA4 property. So, do you actually need a streaming export from GA4? And here are two use cases that I found useful, so you might be interested in them as well. First use case, BigQuery daily export will have a delay of up to 3 days. So, using a streaming export, we can have access to GA4 data much quicker. When I initially started using BigQuery together with GA4, this was my expectation, that we have a daily export that always has data about previous days starting from yesterday. And in addition, we have a streaming export that always has data only from the current day. And in some cases, for some properties, this works as expected, but most often it doesn't, at least at the time of recording of this video. In reality, in many cases, daily export doesn't have yesterday's data processed yet, so we are lagging at least 1 day behind. And the streaming export will have not only today's events available in BigQuery, but also at least yesterday as well, up to 3 days in the past. With streaming export, you would have your data almost instantly for the current day and for all the days that haven't been processed yet by the standard daily export. This will be especially useful if you are using BigQuery data in any dashboards like Looker Studio or Power BI. So if a couple of days of data delay is not something that you are willing to live with, I would suggest enabling streaming option. And the second use case, real-time reporting. Sometimes it might be necessary to monitor and analyze real-time data that GA4 UI just can't support. So having a streaming export in combination with scheduled queries might come in handy. For example, you might have just launched a new web app version for a segment of customers, and you want to keep an eye on vital metrics for each version. Firstly, in GA4, you will see only the last 30 minutes, and you can see dynamics for, let's say, last 6 or 24 hours. And you can easily solve that by connecting your BigQuery with any of the BI tools. Then, if you are interested in other metrics other than users or conversions, you can't view those in real time from UI. However, you can customize any metric from real-time data if it is passed in the data export. And lastly, the segmentation capability might not support the type of filters and rules that you want to apply to your data. Again, this is solvable using SQL and streaming data export. Now, let's take a look at the costs. So, using streaming export in GA4 is not free, and you will have to pay for each event processed in real time. At the moment, Google charges $1 per 200 megabytes, and that's around 5 cents per 1 gigabyte. And as per Google, 1 gigabyte of data would be around 600,000 events. On practice, however, often one event weighs less than 1 kilobyte, so theoretically, you could process up to 1 million events, and that would cost you 5 cents. For example, if your website currently collects 200,000 events per day, and one event on average doesn't contain a lot of data, then you would have to pay only 1 cent per day to have real-time data in BigQuery. That's about 30 cents per month to have that in place for this event volume. You can quickly estimate event count per day by looking at Engagement Events report in Google Analytics or under Examine User Behavior category, Events report. So if you have previously picked business objectives when creating a property, then same report will be located under different category, but it will be named the same. So in the report where you can see all of the events, you can just pick, let's say, last 30 days. And from here, look at the total event count. So as you can see, we have almost 3 million events here. And as we have seen that 1 million events would cost us around $5, means that per 30 days for 3 million events, we would pay 15 cents to have this real-time data in BigQuery. This is just a quick way how to get a ballpark costs of this feature, and of course it can vary based on how much data you're sending within each event. But in general, as you can see, for most of the websites out there, the cost of having real-time data in BigQuery will be very low. Now that we know the use cases and the costs, let's do some example queries to see how to extract this data on practice. In BigQuery, once you enter your project workspace, real-time data will be found under Analytics Property Dataset in partition table called Events Intraday. The number in the brackets indicate how many days of data you have here. If you have only today's data, it will show only one, as I have here. If yesterday's data hasn't been processed yet into daily events table, then you will see 2 and so on. So for example, I have here only 1 day today in the real-time export, and I have 62 days in the regular daily export. So usually if you see here something more than 1, it means that you are lagging behind at least 1 day in the past. So this is the table that you should be querying to get any data that hasn't made it yet into daily export. So let's take a look at an example. This is the basic query for the daily data export. As you can see, we have a simple subquery which gets all the data from daily export table, which is named events. So this one, and we're fetching data for the given date range. So in my example, I'm using start date of 12th of September and the end date of today, 24th of September. If you're wondering what this table suffix means, this is just a way how to query multiple days of data from GA exports in BigQuery, since BigQuery creates a separate table for each date exported from GA4. And then we are only counting number of users per date and ordering results to show latest dates first. And if you worked with GA4 data in BigQuery before, you know that this is the basic example on how to get number of users from BigQuery. So let's run this. So results will show data only up to 23rd of September, but still nothing for today, even if I have provided 24th of September in my filter. And this is because this data hasn't been processed yet in daily exports. If there are even more days available in the intraday table, not just one as I have here, then you will see even more days missing from the results. If you open daily table and take a look at the dates dropdown, you will see that 24th of September is missing here. And this is because it is available in the intraday table. So you can see 24th is here. Now, since streaming or real-time export has exactly the same column structure, then obviously for the daily exports, we can just change the name and use the same queries. So for example, if I change these events to events intraday, and if we run this again, now you can see I have data, but only for today. And if your intraday table contains more days, you would see more dates here. So our goal, if we are using or we want to use more up-to-date data, we want to combine both of those tables. To do that, I like to use union all command. So let's copy this query here. And for one of the select statements, we'll use regular export table, which will be just events. And then for the other table, events intraday. You should keep the same dates here. And potentially, if you want to add any additional filters, you can do that here as well for both of the tables. And let's combine those using union all. We are also using a subquery called GA4 data, since it makes it easier to reuse this combination of daily and intraday export in other subqueries without copying this whole thing. As you can see in our select statement, we are using this GA4 data, so we don't have to, duplicate this. Okay, let's run the query. So now from these results, you will see that we now have information from both daily exports and streaming exports, since we now have 24th of September along with any other dates from daily export table. And the good part is that your data will not overlap using this approach, since Google automatically deletes information from real-time tables once the data has been processed by daily export. So when daily export will process 24th of September, then it will be automatically deleted from events intraday, so this information will not be counted twice. If you want, you can find the template for this query in the video description. In addition, if you want to reduce the data processing volumes, you can also limit number of columns that you are fetching in GA4 table, since most likely you won't need most of those columns. We are currently fetching everything that we have in the events table, but we could limit this, for example, to event date, user pseudo ID, maybe event name, etc. You would need to specify the same columns in both select statements in order for this query to work, but this is one way how you could reduce the data volume processed by this query. So yeah, this is just a basic example how to get you started on querying streaming exports from GA4 and get most up-to-date information that can be later used in other BI tools like Looker Studio or Power BI. Now for the second use case, actual real-time reports. The queries here will be very different depending on what you would like to monitor and the reporting tools you use. So I will share only high-level process that you can follow here to get your custom real-time report up and running from BigQuery. First of all, you can use similar approach of combining daily and intraday reports so that you can get some data from the previous day if you are monitoring something that goes beyond streaming export. Then you will need to split your data into smaller chunks. Depending on how granular you want to see your metric, you could split that data per hour or per minute, and you can use event timestamp for that. So in this example, I'm combining event date together with hour, which is extracted from the provided timestamp at the given time zone, and also adding a minute when the event happened. So together we get a string that combines together date, hour, and also minute. This way, in your BI tool, you could get a chart that displays data per minute, something like this. Then another important thing is to use dynamic date range here. So, for example, if you're monitoring last 2 days or last several hours, you would need to filter that in GA4 subquery. So here I'm using an example of current date function. In this case, each time the query is run, depending on when it's run, it will always use the end date as current date from given time zone, and the data will be fetched from the last 5 days. So I'm just using current date minus 5 to get last 5 days in the past. Now, once you have your query prepared, you will need to execute this on regular intervals, like every hour or every couple of minutes. You can do that either from BI tool and run this SQL directly from there, or use scheduling inside of BigQuery. To use scheduling, you would need to click on Schedule button above your query. You can give it a name, then you can select refresh interval. So for example, if you want to refresh it once an hour, you could select repeat frequency hours and repeat every 1 hour. If you want to refresh it more often, you can select minutes. And in BigQuery, you can repeat it up to 15 minutes. So you cannot repeat it more often than 15 minutes if you're doing this from BigQuery. Then you can select start time. So either to start the query once you have saved it or start at specified time. If you want to end this refresh at a certain time, you can select that here. Then it's important to select your destination of this query, since you'll be querying that table in your BI tool. Let's select the dataset, then pick table name. It can be a new table as well. And then depending on how you query your data, you would select append to table or override table. Since I'm always fetching the full time frame, disregarding the previous results that were fetched from Google Analytics, I will use override table. So each time this query runs, there will be completely new results overwriting the previous data. Then you can adjust your location if you want, and that's it. You can save it, If you haven't yet created any scheduled queries, then you will be asked to authorize this request. Once your query has been created, you could find it under this section. This will be the main place to monitor all your scheduled queries. And if you click on the query, you would see also a detailed view on when the query was last run and if there were any issues executing this query. Now, if everything went well, after some time you should see a green checkbox here. And if you click on the query, you should see that your query has completed successfully. Then you can find your data under the table and dataset that you have provided in scheduled query settings. Now, all you need to do is to connect this table to your reporting tool and make sure it makes a timely refresh of this data. As you can see from these simple examples, it is relatively easy to have up-to-date information from GA4 BigQuery using streaming option. Additionally, streaming export costs would be really low for the vast majority of businesses. So if you are using BigQuery data for reporting on GA4 metrics, there is no real reason for you not to opt in for this feature. One drawback that you should be aware of is that while working with real-time data, it's not fully processed yet in the same way as daily export. These tables might not include all possible information such as imported data files and user channel information, but other than that, you should be able to use GA4 real-time data in BigQuery for most of the use cases in the same way as regular export. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching until the end. Hopefully this was useful, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Good luck!